The alien princess chose a human mate. She never knew he was humanity's deadliest weapon. She picked me because I was the only one in the room who wasn't trying to impress her. The selection hall on Vareth Station was filled with males from 14 different species, every one of them taller, more luminous, more visually striking than a plain human in a gray suit. The Kael'thari delegate was 9 feet of iridescent scale and jeweled crest. The Doran ambassador had 3 hearts, all of them beating in visible rhythm beneath translucent skin. Even the Fail representative had wings, folded neatly behind him like a formal coat, and they shimmered with soft gold each time he breathed. I stood near the refreshment table and held a glass I hadn't touched in 40 minutes. Earth had been invited to this ceremony the same way you invite a distant, slightly embarrassing relative to a wedding. Technically included, practically invisible. The Vareth conclave had extended the invitation as a diplomatic gesture after humanity spent 3 years politely insisting on a seat at every galactic table we could find. Nobody here expected Seranael, third bloom of House Vareth, heir to one of the oldest mid-tier thrones in the known systems, to look twice at the human. I wasn't expecting it either. She crossed the floor in the middle of a conversation with her head advisor and stopped directly in front of me. Up close, she was nothing like the official portraits circulated in Earth's diplomatic briefs. Those images captured the formal version of her, composed, regal, bioluminescent markings, glowing in careful ceremonial patterns along her jaw and collarbone. In person, there was a tiredness around her eyes that the portraits never showed, and she was looking at me the way people look at something they can't immediately categorize. She said something in Vareth dialect. My earpiece translated it with a half-second delay. "You're bored." I said the first thing that came into my head, which was a human expression I hadn't thought through for cross-species delivery. I said I wasn't bored. I was just doing what my people called marinating, which was the art of standing still in a loud room until the room told you something useful. She stared at me. Then she laughed. It was a genuine laugh, not a polite one. Her markings flickered amber for 2 full seconds, which I later learned was the Vareth equivalent of being caught completely off guard. She selected me before her advisors had time to physically move between us. The uproar was immediate and spectacular. I kept my expression warm and slightly confused, which wasn't entirely an act. Part of me was genuinely startled. The other part was already counting the guards at each exit, mapping the sight lines from the upper gallery, and noting that the Kael'thari delegate had gone very still, in a way that suggested he was recording the scene, rather than reacting to it. Old habits don't die, they just learn to dress better. My name, for the record, is Marcus Vale. I am, on paper, a cultural attaché and linguistic specialist, attached to Earth's nascent diplomatic corps. My service record is clean and thoroughly unremarkable. I speak 11 languages with native fluency, and 6 more with functional competence. I have represented Earth at 7 interstellar functions and caused no incidents at any of them. Everything in that paragraph is accurate, and almost none of it is the full truth. The full truth is that I had been placed in that hall by Director Owuna, the head of Earth's Strategic Intelligence Division, with the specific mandate to map every relationship, debt, weakness, and hidden pressure point inside the Vareth conclave. Earth had been pushing for full membership in the galactic community for 12 years. We kept hitting walls. Those walls had names and histories and, most importantly, vulnerabilities. My job was to find them. I had not been sent to fall in love with the princess. That part happened on its own. The first 3 months in the Vareth Palace were a masterclass in controlled observation. Seranael was brilliant and politically constrained, which is a combination that produces a specific kind of restlessness in people. She moved through her obligations, like someone wading through shallow water, doing what was required, always thinking about somewhere else. She studied me the way I studied floor plans, methodically, with genuine curiosity. She asked me once why humans had no bioluminescent markings. Every species in the conclave had some form of visible emotional signaling, whether through light, color change, feather display, or resonant tone. Humans had none of that, she said, not unkindly, that I looked unfinished to her, like something had been left out. I told her that humans had learned to use words instead of light, that we said what we felt out loud, in full sentences, which was considered almost barbarically direct in most of the galaxy, but was the thing our species had used to build everything we'd ever built. She was quiet for a long time after that. Then she said that words could lie in ways that light could not. I agreed with her. I did not tell her that I was proof of that. I kept reporting to Director Olna. Every week, via a subdermal communication tap the size of a grain of rice, I sent back everything I had learned, the full architecture of the Vareth Court's political alliances, the names of 3 conclave members who had been quietly skimming treaty funds for a decade, the location of a disputed armament cache that 3 different species had each officially reported as destroyed, the private financial entanglements between Admiral Thrakex and 4 of the Conclave's Border Patrol commanders. Thrakex was the wall I had been sent to find. He commanded the Conclave's enforcement arm with the confidence of a man who believed the galaxy had a correct order, and that humans were nowhere near the top of it. He had blocked Earth's membership applications twice through procedural maneuvering, and the intelligence suggested he was building towards something larger, some framework that would formally classify humanity as a non-sovereign protected species, which was conclave language for a civilization that could be administered rather than negotiated with. It was a polite word for a cage. I reported everything. Every corridor, every relationship, every name. I was thorough, and I was professional, and I told myself the whole time that this was the mission, that the mission was what mattered, and that the warmth I felt every time Serenale walked into a room was simply the natural result of extended proximity under high-stress conditions. Then she took me to the archive room. It was below the main palace, carved out of the original asteroid that the station had been built around. Centuries of her family's history were stored there in crystalline records that played like memories when you touched them. She showed me the founding war of her house, the treaty that had cost them a moon and saved them a generation, the grief records of a queen 300 years dead, who had written her losses into the archive herself, voice shaking, so her descendants would know exactly what they were protecting. Serenale stood with her hand resting on one of the older crystals, and she didn't say anything for a long time. When she spoke, she talked about her homeworld, the original one, before the station, before the politics. The way the atmosphere had smelled at altitude, a word in her language that translated roughly as, the particular quality of light through water in the early morning, for which no other language had an equivalent. She wasn't a political asset. She was a person who had given up a planet and was still grieving it quietly in a basement, while the rest of the galaxy moved around her. I sent my report to Director Omuna that night, and I left out everything about the archive room. Omuna knew immediately, because she was very good at her job, and she didn't say anything. She just noted the gap and moved on. That was the most significant thing she could have done. That silence was permission, and I think she had been waiting to give it to me for a while. 4 days later, 3 individuals entered my private residence through a maintenance access point at 3 in the morning. They were professionals. Silent entry, appropriate tools, coordinated positioning. The lead one was fast. None of them were fast enough, because I have been doing this longer than most species have had faster than light travel, and I don't need augmentation to be effective at close range in a dark room. It took 8 seconds. It made very little noise. I staged the scene to look like a gas pressure failure in the room's climate system. The head of Serenale's security filed it as an environmental malfunction and closed the report in 6 hours. Serenale was never informed. I included a very brief mention of an equipment anomaly in my next communication to Okuna. She responded, noted, that was all. I understood then that Thragex was accelerating. 3 individuals sent against a human diplomat wasn't a warning. It was a test to see if the path was clear. The path was not clear. What happened next came 11 months into my time at the palace. I was in the Western Council chamber with Serenale, going over a trade language standardization proposal that she was quietly trying to push through without triggering opposition from the 3 conclave members who made their income from translation monopolies when an emergency session was called. We walked into a full tribunal. Thragex was standing at the center of the chamber in formal enforcement colors, which meant he had invoked his authority as military commander, not just political representative. He had intercepted and decoded a segment of subdermal communication traffic. He had enough of it to prove that an unauthorized intelligence operative had been operating inside the Vareth court for nearly a year. He had my name. He presented his case to the full conclave with the calm of someone who had been rehearsing this moment for months. Which he had. The evidence was real. The transmissions were real. Under conclave law, operating an undisclosed intelligence asset within a member court was a hostile act. And a hostile act against a conclave member by a non-member civilization opened the door to formal classification of that civilization as an adversarial entity, which opened the door to everything Thraex had been building toward. I looked at Serenale in the gallery. She was seated very still, her markings flat and dim, which I had learned meant she was doing her most careful thinking. She looked back at me. And I knew. She had figured it out. I'm not certain exactly when. Perhaps 2 weeks ago. Perhaps longer. She had said nothing, asked nothing, and had continued to sit across from me over meals and share memories of her homeworld. She had been waiting to see what I would do when the moment came. Thrax finished his case and called for Earth to be stripped of diplomatic status and classified as a hostile intelligence power, pending formal review and likely subjugation proceedings. I asked to speak. There were objections. Thraex smiled, because he believed anything I said could only make his position stronger. If I denied it, he would release the full transcript and expose the lie. If I confirmed it, he had the confession he needed. He had built this trap carefully. In his experience, humans were impulsive and emotional, and either way I fell, he won. He had never fought a human who had been doing this for 18 years. I did not deny it. I stood in front of the full conclave assembly, and I told them the truth. Yes, I was an intelligence operative. Yes, Earth had placed me here specifically to gather information. Yes, I had reported what I found. I was not going to pretend otherwise, because the people in this room had seen enough convenient pretending to last several lifetimes. I turned and looked at Serenale. I said that before anything else was said about laws or sanctions or what Earth had done, there was one thing that needed to be stated plainly, in front of everyone. I said that I had been sent here with a mission, and that I had run that mission, and that somewhere in the middle of it, something had happened that was not in any briefing or any operational parameter or any contingency plan that Earth had written. I said that I had fallen in love with her, and that she deserved to hear that from me, in front of witnesses, before the rest of this conversation went any further. The chamber was completely silent. Serenale's markings did something I had never seen before. Every line of light along her jaw and collarbone shifted to a deep, steady blue that pulsed once and held. Her advisor leaned toward her and she moved her hand slightly, which was the Varith gesture for, "I am handling this." Thrax recovered quickly and pushed forward. He called for the vote. He called for immediate military authorization. He noted that his fleet was already positioned outside the system for exactly this contingency, and that the Conclave had everything it needed to act. I asked for one more moment to speak in Earth's formal defense, which I was entitled to as the accredited diplomatic representative of my species. Thrax nodded, still confident. I opened the case I had carried into the chamber. Inside were 43 individual dossiers. They were not military files, they were not weapon schematics, or troop movements, or anything that looked like the kind of power most species reached for when they felt threatened. They were personal histories. Careful, detailed, meticulously sourced records of the private business of every significant conclave member in that room, the treaty violations that had been quietly buried, the financial arrangements that would unravel alliances if they became public, the agreements made in private sessions that contradicted the positions stated in public ones, the names of the commanders who answered to Thraex personally, and what they had been paid, and what they had done for that payment, and where the records of those transactions were stored. I placed one document on the table in front of Thraex. I did not raise my voice. I said that Earth did not want a war. We had no interest in one, and no instinct for domination. We were a species that had spent most of our history finding creative ways to get what we needed without burning down the building we were standing in. We were good at that. We were, if I was being honest, very good at the version of conflict that happened before anyone gave an order to fire. The version that moved through information and patience, and the particular human skill of making friends with the people that powerful individuals assumed were beneath their notice. I said that every person in that chamber knew something that Thraex did not appear to have considered, that you did not need to be the biggest creature in the room to be the most dangerous one. You only needed to know more than everyone else, and to have been paying attention long before anyone realized you were watching. I said Earth would like to continue its application for full Conclave membership. We believed the timing was now quite favorable. Thrax's fleet stood down. I found out later that 2 of his 4 loyal border commanders had received personal communications in the previous hour that convinced them this was not the moment to act. The Conclave vote failed to reach the threshold for hostile classification. 3 members, who had previously supported Thrax's procedural blocks against Earth's membership applications, abruptly changed their positions and requested further review. Thrax was removed from his command position 12 days later by the Conclave itself, quietly, without public explanation. His own people had looked at what he had nearly exposed them all to, and decided he was no longer worth the risk. Seranael met me in the corridor outside the chamber. She stood a few feet away, and she didn't speak for a long time. That was fine. I had nowhere to be. Finally, she said, "How many of those files were about me?" I said none. I said that I had started a file on her in the first month, because that was what the mission required, and that I had deleted it completely at the end of the 3rd month, and that my director had noticed the gap and had not asked me to fill it. She asked if any of it had been real. I said yes. I said the laugh was an accident. I said the cooking was real, and the archive room was real, and every conversation we had ever had where I forgot for a few minutes what I was supposed to be doing was real. I said that what I was also real, and that I understood those 2 things were difficult to hold at the same time, and that she had every right to put one of them down. She was quiet again. Then she said that she had known for a while. She said she had noticed small things over time. The way I cataloged rooms when I entered them. The way I positioned myself near exits. The way I had once, in the middle of a completely casual conversation, listed the names and current postings of every military officer aboard the station without being asked. She had filed these things away and waited. She said, "I wanted to see which one you were going to choose to be." I told Director Owana that evening that I was requesting retirement from active operations. She accepted without argument. Her final message to me came the next morning. It said, "You were always better at the relationship than the mission. I think that was the point." I read that message 3 times. I'm still not sure whether it was a compliment or the most complicated debrief of my career. With Oyuna, those 2 things were often the same. A year has passed since the tribunal. Earth's application for full Conclave membership was approved in the 6th month of that year, with support from 11 members, including 4 who had previously voted against us in closed session. No one on Earth's diplomatic team knows precisely how that happened. The intelligence division knows. They are not saying. Seranael and I are together. That is a simpler sentence than the reality it describes. The reality involves ongoing negotiation, and the occasional argument about honesty that is extremely fair coming from her direction, and the fact that I am learning to read the emotional vocabulary of her bioluminescent markings, which is one of the most genuinely difficult things I have attempted in my career. She has started asking me to teach her what I know, not the operational pieces, the foundational ones, how to read a room, how to listen for the thing that isn't being said, how to be so unremarkable that the people around you forget to be careful. I am teaching her. She is learning faster than anyone I have ever trained. Several Conclave members have approached me privately in recent months with offers of what they called cultural exchange consultancy. I declined all of them. I am retired. I have a life to build, and for the first time in 18 years, I am building it in one place, with one person, without a secondary objective. She laughs at me sometimes when I automatically count the exits in a new room. I can't stop doing it. She says she finds it oddly reassuring. I understand that completely. It is, in the end, what I am, what I have always been. The difference is that now there is someone who knows the full picture, and stayed anyway, and that is the thing that undoes a person faster than any operation, any threat, any fleet positioned outside a station. She picked me because I seemed harmless. I stayed because she made me want to be. That is the most dangerous thing anyone has ever done to me, and I would not trade it for anything in this galaxy or the ones beyond it.